Hi, this is Paul. I started making this video as to whether or not I was going to keep listening to Eric and Bret Weinstein because I've listened to them quite a bit. I've made a few videos about them. And I made a mention of him this week in someplace on social media. Someone said, "Oh, you really have to watch his recent conversation with Lex," which I watched. I actually did a watch party after I figured out how to do it on the Bridges of Meaning Discord server, and that was a whole lot of fun. I'll have to do more of those again with some of these videos. And for the most part, was sort of disappointed by the conversation. I've one of the things that I've noted in YouTube land is that this whole idea of mapped territory versus unmapped territory or unknown territory is very real on YouTube. You might watch a YouTuber for a while and then you sort of get your fill of that person. You sort of map them and then they become repetitive and you move on. And that's sort of a natural process. And it's happened with people watching me and it happens with me watching other people. It's sort of regular and sort of feeling like I've sort of mapped out the I started on the Discord server. I started I know I said that puns were horrible, but Weinstein, Winestein. They both whine a lot. They're both very anxious. They're both very nervous. They're both sounding the alarm. They're both trying to figure out how to save the world. So the Weinstein brothers are whining about all sorts of things. That doesn't mean I don't love and respect and appreciate them. I've devoted a fair amount of my life in the last couple of years to listen to these two, and they're both brilliant, and they both make an important contribution, but they're doing a lot of whining. And so some repeated points on the portal that Eric comes around to again and again. Institutions are held captive by one age demographic. The boomers are not giving up power. And this election for him was sort of an example of that. Now, you have to remember that Barack Obama is a sort of there's a bunch of us in here. I think Eric is a year or two younger than I am. I don't know how old Joe Rogan is. Jordan Peterson's a year older than I am. We're all sort of too young to be boomers, too old to be Xers. We're sort of tweeners in here. I was born in 63. Sometime born in the mid-1960s. We didn't grow up with the boomer years. American graffiti was not how we grew up. And so the complaint is that people are living longer, so people are healthier longer, so boomers aren't giving up power. And this is evident in the current general election with two men in their 70s. This age demographic is refusing to share their wealth with their children. I think these are often true and important points. And I think the me generation, as Eric mentioned, I forget which conversation this was in. I've listened to a fair number of his portals. The me generation is sticking with being the me generation. And as a Christian minister, there's something to this because obviously Christianity is supposed to be about not me. But the me generation has sort of kept their money. Institutions block creative, disruptive thinkers. And to that point, it's like, duh, of course they do. Has he never worked in the middle of a normal institution? Has he never understood? I mean, he's understood educational institutions, academia. Academia is, a new idea against a current regime. I mean, read Kuhn's history of scientific, revolutions. I mean, it's just natural. It's normal. It's what institutions were made to do, and we're going to talk about more of that later. The U.S. economic system doesn't know how to live without growth. Well, I think that's true. But remember, part of when I listen to Eric, I also think because we're both sort of the same age, the time frame of our years. And so it's sort of natural when you get into your 50s to start using the yardstick of your life to measure the world by. That's I remember Tim Keller talking about why he didn't write books until his 50s. And once he got into his 50s, he wrote like crazy. He's written a ton of books. And partly, he said, because anything I would have written in the 20s I'd want to burn today. Anything in the 30s, my 30s or 40s, would have been sort of not fully baked. So now your 50s is sort of the time of your life where, okay, it's time to sort of fill out your career and begin to leave a legacy. And so, hey, hats off to the Weinstein brothers who are doing podcasts and putting their stuff out there, and good for them. Keep it up. Write books. Do things. That's what you should do in your 50s. A few very powerful economic elites have gamed the system against the American worker. Yeah. Again, some of these things are, to me, they're just so, they're worth saying, but they're pretty obvious. There's a conspiracy behind most mass media outlets and social media platforms to elect a Democratic establishment candidate and a woke social agenda. Yeah, that seems pretty obvious, and we've heard conservatives making this complaint. I just can't believe the mainstream media, the whole mainstream media. That's why I use the word mass media, because I think right now the important difference is between mass media and social media, which is slightly different. I'll talk a bit more about that later in this video too. And then in his recent, he did a recent long conversation with Douglas Murray, most of which I haven't listened to, partly because I've listened to plenty of Murray and plenty of Weinstein, and it's just kind of most of those points over and over and over again, and just more illustrations of the points that they're trying to make. And yeah, okay, I'm there. I thought the prologue, the little monologue he did at the beginning of it, that was the most important, the most important, and I thought the most interesting part of the entire video. I do want to finish listening to it, and I probably will, but there's a lot of good stuff out there. It's very interesting because most of the portals with respect to Donald Trump, Eric was saying things like Donald Trump is an existential threat. And then at the prologue of this recent video, he sort of backs down from that and says, vote for Trump or Biden or whomever. It doesn't really matter because both parties are the same. And I remember that was Ralph Nader's point back during the George W. Bush Al Gore campaign. His point was that both parties are the same. And that's probably a little less true today because of the polarization. Both parties are a little different, but they're also fairly the same in a bunch of the ways that Eric really likes to whine about and point out. And then we've got to get off this rock. And that he went on to with, it's a point he's made in many places. Now, it's not bad making your point, repeating your point again and again and again, because this is something I actually learned from George W. Bush, because I was following politics a lot more closely back then. Just Trump has sort of, the signal to noise ratio in politics has been really difficult to get through, making, written politics. I read politics more now than I watch or listen, and just because of the various contours of the media. But, we've got to get out. So the repetition isn't itself a bad thing, because he goes on this show and he goes on that show, he goes on this. We all repeat ourselves. Some of you watching my videos know I repeat myself all the time about all sorts of things. But I was listening to him go off on this in the Lex interview. And do you really think that we will leave our habits and problems behind if we, in fact, went off into outer space? There's this interesting, a lot of people pointed me to this little series on HBO Max, Raised by Wolves, and I've watched most of it. And that's in the ballpark of we've got to get off this rock and thinking about, okay, yeah, escapism, because that's basically just escapism. We've spoiled the world. We've got to, okay, and yeah, learn more science, do more things, sure. But the idea that humanity, it's sort of akin to getting out of your marriage without doing a lot of thinking about who you were and jumping into your next marriage, and oh my goodness, it repeated itself. And the pastors and the therapists are like, yeah, really, tell me about it. No, really, tell me about it, because you thought you were going to leave your problems when you left your job or left your spouse or left your home, only to find out that most of our problems are inside of us as individuals and as communities and families, et cetera, et cetera. So I at the Discord server, I asked, because I was sort of being a little snippy and trollish against Eric, and said, which of his portals should I really most pay attention to and go back and re-listen to? And they pointed me to 19. And again, a lot of it was pretty much what I had heard before. Sort of soured by institutions, and you can't help but get a sense of sour grapes from Eric with some of this. True or not true, I don't know, but institutions have not been very, very good to him, apparently. But to me, from my little status perspective, I look at him and think, well, no, they've probably been pretty good. I mean, he's had, I'm sure, a very well-paying job. Do you think Teal Capital has offered him a better salary than Livingstone's church on the corner of Florin Road in Sacramento? Gosh, I'd have to see the paperwork. But what was really interesting in listening to this, and I'm sort of tempted to play some of it, but I'll play a little bit and listen to it on the clip channel or something. But wants to start a movement, and a whole bunch of the sort of things that I've done, he talks about in this video in terms of starting a community and then the Discord server. There was a Discord server apparently on the portal, and apparently it's split, and Bridges of Meaning hasn't split yet, so that's a pretty good thing. But the community and the meetups and all of that, and, he almost sounded like a pastor. And again, the comment I have both with Bret's Plan B, all of that type thinking is that if you really want to change the world, you're probably best off looking at people who have changed the world. And I'm sort of pushing back against Bret Weinstein's point that he made against Jordan Peterson on Joe Rogan with respect to metaphorical truth and religion. I've done a lot of commentary on that in my recent previous videos. But because, the context changed. Well, now to throw in some Vervaekian relevance realization stuff here, we're not exactly sure to what degree the contexts have changed. We don't know how the contexts have changed. Looks like I'm peaking a little bit here. I'm continuing to try to... Here, I'll put my mic down a little bit. We don't know how the contexts have changed. And we're not going to really figure out how the contexts have changed unless we continue to try to play around with things and figure them out. So at the beginning of 2020, when he recorded this, he wants January 17, 2020. Of course, who of us knew what was coming in 2020? And wants to get rich enough, basically, to have FU money. And some of these things he repeated with Lex again. And when Lex was saying, I don't really need money, and Eric sort of the old, oh, yes, you're going to want money. And, my friend Rod gave me a little bit of this talk, and, I see his point. Money's a very tricky thing because what we love about money is it's so colonizable. But what Jesus has to say about money is really profoundly true, because money and the things we get with it very quickly colonize us. And there's a degree of wisdom that is afforded in the lack of freedom which lack of money creates. So at the beginning of 2020, of course, the Democratic primary was still in process, and he's all Weinstein-y and disky about Andrew Yang and Tulsi Gabbard. And, well, fair enough, but here's the thing. It's not just... See, part of what we're dealing with, and when we have the word institutions, we're talking about two realities. Marriage is an institution. IBM is an institution. The Democratic Party is an institution, okay? Marriage is an institution, and the Democratic Party is an institution. It's kind of unfair that we use the same word for both, but it's also, and I'll get into this a little bit later, also kind of important because words are sloshy. And I'll define that a little bit later. I started using sloshy for words a little while ago. And so those of you who are very regular listeners know that. And those of you who are only sporadic listeners might have missed the sloshy bit. But we'll get into sloshy a little bit later. But basically what happened, it seemed to me, with the Joe Biden wrapping up the candidacy, because remember, Iowa and New Hampshire didn't go very well for Joe Biden. And then suddenly, when you get into South Carolina, well, this in some ways was a repeat of 2016 with Hillary. That, and it's also why Hillary lost to Barack Obama. It was basically the black community. And again, so many people who only know the black community by watching it on TV, and rappers and football players and basketball players don't know the black community. The black community is the most churched, the most overtly Christian community in North America. It's just true. It's deeply conservative. And even in places like New York, where I grew up, or California, where I live now, there are deep ties to Southern culture. Now, some of this is changing because if you read, again, another book I recommend, I got to sort out my bookshelf here, The Warmth of Other Suns by Isabel Wilkerson, which talks about the Great Migration. Important book if you want to understand the black community, because, of course, I grew up in the black community, and even though I'm white, and my growing up was interesting because of my father's church in Patterson, but when I read that book, it was like a lot of black and white memories turned to color, because suddenly I understood a whole lot more about the black community. And pastoring this church where there are many individuals in my church who, some are senior citizens, grew up in Florida, back east, or the old South, Louisiana, moved to California. The black community is pretty conservative. And so I'm not surprised Joe Biden, locked up the election because of the black community. And that's also why Bernie didn't get it. And so a lot of the complaints about, so Andrew Yang, Tulsi Gabbard, Bernie Sanders, yeah, but Andrew Yang and Tulsi Gabbard, they're not going to do as well in the black community. And the black community is a significant part of the Democratic Party. And, part of the reason I grew up always voting Democratic was I grew up in the black community, and that's who you voted for. And most of the Christian Reformed Church grew up not in the black community, and so they voted for Republicans. And these old patterns endure, and they don't change quickly. And so, yeah, guess what? The Democratic establishment has played favorites and doesn't play fair. All institutions are unfair. The purpose of an institution is to repeat and instantiate and help a specific pattern endure throughout time. Institutions are created to sort of mitigate the age of decay. Well, what do I mean by the age of decay? I mean, well, now I'm getting into some biblical stuff, because you have the present evil age, the Bible calls it, and which I call the age of decay, because everything decays in it, and the Greeks wrestled with it, and forever people have wrestled with the age of decay. And in some ways, when Jim Croce sings Time in a Bottle, he's singing against the age of decay, because in this lifetime, everything breaks down. Institutions break down, loves break down, families break down, our bodies break down. Everything breaks down here, and this gets into a whole bunch of more philosophy about things that break down and don't break down, what the Greeks dealt with, why the Apostle Paul in 1 Corinthians talks about Jesus not decaying, Romans 8. It's a very, very long conversation that we're getting into. And so guess what? Institutions are designed to preserve different things and to resist other things and to resist change. It's like the most basic thing about institutions. And again, what I appreciate about Eric Weinstein is that of the IDW, he more self-consciously deals with institutions, and I think he's right. And this was a real weakness of the Jordan Peterson wave and what he did. And so, when in many ways, when Eric Weinstein named the IDW, that was an institutional move. And part of what he really brings to the IDW conversations is his institutional savvy. And so, his whining about institutions in this way, I find really peculiar. All right. Now, at the end of 2020, again, the little prologue to his podcast with Douglas Murray, okay, Donald Trump suddenly isn't the existential threat he was, and I'm going to talk about it a little bit later. We're seeing whether or not Donald Trump gets reelected tomorrow. Even in his second term, Donald Trump will not have the power he had in his first term. And we're going to get into why that is, because Donald Trump is fundamentally not an institutional man. And if you haven't figured that out about him yet, you're not paying attention. You don't know what institutions are. And you don't know how institutions relate to individuals. Institutions in some ways can sort of be the ring of Sauron. Why did Sauron make a ring and go through the the hazard of embodying himself in a ring apart from himself. Well, it's sort of like the Horcrux in Harry Potter. And institutions are that way. And so, again, during the Jordan Peterson wave, when I was comparing him to someone like Billy Graham understood institutions, and what Billy Graham was able to do in the Billy Graham Evangelistic Association was amplify his qualities and make up for some of his liabilities by using institutions. That's what institutions do. So institutions and individuals have a very interesting relationship with each other. And so the second term of Donald Trump, if he's reelected, won't be like the first. It won't be anything like the first, actually, because Donald Trump will probably experience a continued decrease in power because his ability to basically intimidate and keep other Republicans in line was very much based on the idea of upcoming elections. And by virtue of, if he wins a second term, he won't have another upcoming election. Now, he might tweet about a third term and all that, but no, even the Energizer Bunny like Donald Trump won't have enough in the tank. And again, if Sam Harris and Andrew Sullivan had a very interesting conversation too, and if you've got Trump derangement syndrome, you'll love that conversation. And if you're allergic to Trump derangement syndrome, you'll hate that conversation. But I found it interesting. Anyway, so Eric at the end of 2020 sort of backs down from his own Donald Trump ideas and basically sort of continues this idea about get ready. And it's like, okay, Eric, but get ready for what? You sort of started the Portal podcast thing. You dipped your toe into the Discord server. You started those things, and you kind of backed off from them. And I'm not pointing fingers. I do all that sort of things myself. Now, I do it on a much lower level, but I'm also I'm also fairly cognizant of long-standing institutions, and I'll get into that a little bit later in this video too. So the prologue there, and I actually did a little commentary on that prologue, which I left unfinished and put in the Clips channel too. The Clips channel recently has sort of been a place that I can throw things that I've had so much content for this channel, I haven't wanted to post most days more than one video, so because it sort of clogs up the channel. And so I'm throwing some extra stuff over on the Clips channel, and you can find the link to the Clips channel in the notes below. I named it Vander Clips with a K because the last name is Klay, so VANDERKLIPS. And somebody already made the comment that you got like an hour-long, 2-hour video in the Vander Clips channel. Yeah, I do, because I'm hopelessly bad at this stuff, and just is the truth. Now, party elites play favorites. Institutions resist change. I made this point just a few minutes ago. That's what institutions are designed to do. And parties don't present a level playing field for their primaries. They don't, because parties are, like other institutions, made in order to repeat a pattern. They're like repeaters, okay? I don't know a lot about this technology, but there are cell phone repeaters in subways because the other towers won't go there. And they just take a signal and they take a pattern and they're there to repeat the pattern. Now, as sort of Donald Trump did in the Republican Party, he overwhelmed some long-standing patterns in the Republican Party, but as the power of Donald Trump fades, some of those patterns will reemerge, and you'll have, the Lincoln Republicans. Is that the group of Republicans that have been actively politicking against Trump? You'll have never Trumpers like French down in, he goes to church with somebody that I met through this channel down in Nashville. Let's see, Daniel French is the Anglican that I talk to, and see, I sometimes have trouble keeping you all apart because I don't see you in the person. So Daniel French is in the UK in this beautiful town that if I ever get to England, I want to visit his place. Maybe I'll vacation there. And so that's Daniel French. And David French is the journalist who's the Christian, goes to a PCA church, friend of a friend of mine who I won't name because, it's not polite to name people because too many people listen to this. So anyway, Parties don't present a level playing field for their primaries because they themselves are patterns, and they sort of want to what parties are designed to do is to figure out who can best win the presidency or the other elections. That's what parties are designed to do. And this is institutions 101. I don't know why Eric is whining about Democratic elites. And again, this is completely parallel to elites are retarding the free flow of new patterns through their pattern establishment and propagation institutional mechanisms. That's what these things are designed to do. And again, I think the biggest argument against Eric's whining about this is Donald J. Trump. Because, do you remember? I'm sure he does. The dude's very, very smart. He's got a great memory. The beginning of the 2016 primaries, Donald Trump descending on the elevator, Jon Stewart laughing. I laughed. Well, not too long. None of us were laughing anymore. And neither were, Christie, who was probably a contender, Rubio, Ted Cruz. None of them laughed because Donald Trump did his thing and took them all down and made the Republican Party his own. So what does that have to say about Weinstein's complaint here? Weinstein's whining. Okay, Eric, I see your point, and you have lots of illustrations for your point, but here's another point. Donald Trump, the biggest point that's been made for the last 4 years, mitigates against your point here. The group that feels their script is inevitable tends to play it safe and gets blindsided, and that's exactly what happened to the Democrats. Hillary Clinton, generally speaking, again, the old pattern was Republicans fall in line and Democrats fall in love. And so Hillary thought she was going to get the nomination. And who came along but dreamy Barack Obama? And, 8 years as president, still beloved by many Dems at a level that most people can't conceive of. People continue. Barack Obama is royalty for half the United States. He really is. And Michelle Obama is the queen, and she writes a book and goes on Oprah. They are royalty in America, and you really have to understand, the way that royalty in the presidency works out. Donald Trump also is somewhat royalty. Now, a smaller segment, maybe 35 to 40% of the country, but yeah, his quip about shoot somebody, yeah, that's power, that's royalty. And he has a golden throne way up above Manhattan. Donald Trump is royalty too, but now now we're looking at a pattern, because once I use the word royalty, suddenly War of the Roses, European history, these individuals and their presence. And again, I'm going to get into this a little bit later, because the American system by its design means to be institutional and anti-monarchical. We, in a sense, have a paper pope, which is the Constitution of the United States. And so we don't sing God Save the Queen or the King. We should sing God Save the Constitution. And when the president and when members of the military and any other elected official to the federal government pledge to uphold the Constitution, this is institutional. And that's vitally important. And institutions are created to preserve and propagate certain patterns of reality and to have them endure. That's why institutions block and retard. Now, we also call that corruption. And fair enough, it is corruption. And so what has to happen often is that sometimes institutions need to tumble. And now many of us look at that and say, wow, when institutions tumble, there's a lot of waste and sometimes bloodshed and a lot of suffering. Yeah, that's a problem in human beings. And again, a tweet that I put out quite recently was basically about, in this, I'm seeing more jitters with this campaign than any other campaign, any other election. Why? And this is, again, I lived part of my life in the third world, and America is increasingly feeling like the third world. American exceptionalism is waning because, well, what was the heart of American exceptionalism? Because each presidential exchange of power was not accompanied by violence or troops or the military getting involved. And that is a huge, huge blessing and win, and something so precious that must be preserved. And I listen to my friends who are way over on the right, and my friends who are way over on the left, and my colleagues who are way over on the left, more on the left than on the right this year, making noises about this, and I think we are losing a very precious legacy. Please, may we not lose it. Please let us not become. Well, we're getting an older as a country, and an over 200-year run for a government, a form of government. It's pretty good. Anyway, part of what I hear a lot of in Eric, and so Dave the Distributist made a really excellent video. New atheism is boring and you should stop. And the first half of the video is basically about new atheism, but then he gets into Christopher Hitchens. And his section on Christopher Hitchens was really quite good. And again, when I was first making this video, I thought, well, maybe I'd play a good half of that video for this. But as this video grew, I thought, no, I'm not going to do any clips in this video. But if you haven't seen Dave's video on New Atheism is Boring and You Should Stop, you should watch it because it's an excellent video. And Dave, of course, is an interesting guy because he sort of is IDW before IDW was popular. And so Dave's done some videos on Jordan Peterson, and he has a thing for ContraPoints, what's with that, Dave? I mean, really. And Dave's become a conservative, Roman Catholic, loves G.K. Chesterton, et cetera, et cetera. But in halfway through this video introduces this idea called homie, which I really even like the acronym. The idea that humans, when stripped of their influence from institutions and moral systems, tend by their nature towards rational thought, calm discourse, and moral action in a way that produces ordered liberty, prosperity, and equality. And I love how Dave named this, and there's almost always a strong contingent of this on the left. And now, part of the reason I was ordained by Rebel Wisdom in one comment as the pastor of the IDW is that politically I grew up in a black community and I've always sort of been on the left. And so, Eric and Bret, my voting over the years has probably been as left as theirs or more left. And that's changing. Why? Well, lots of videos about that, not only by me, but why am I what is the IDW about? What is with this movement? What is this anxiety about receding modernity and an attempt sort of like 19th century Christian fundamentalists to sort of preserve what's been lost without recognizing how much they themselves have already been changed by the changing of the tide? I mean, that's what's happening. So now homie is, again, I was reading some Will Durant and around, Rousseau and Voltaire and some 18th century French history. And now I've switched to this really cool book, Reformations, that Tom Holland mentioned in Twitter, and I'm reading that. And then I went back to Miracles because I'm doing a conversation with J.P. Marceau and John Vervaeke later this week. And then I switched over to The Narnian, Alan Jacobs, my favorite biography of C.S. Lewis by Alan Jacobs. I love Alan Jacobs as a writer. But my favorite biography of C.S. Lewis by Alan Jacobs, The Narnian, much recommended. Part of the Enlightenment was a rejection of Augustinian anthropology. There was and of course some of you will bring up Sowell's book on this as well, which I haven't read, and I've got it on my list, but I haven't read it yet. Basically, the Augustinian perspective, and this is something that Jordan Peterson got right too. He understands what human beings are like, and part of what I hear from Bret and Eric sometime is that, we have to, well, not so much from Bret, because Bret has his ideas of us being, of genetic, of evolution being a genocidal spelling bee. Oh, that's true, but don't distance that from humans. So we got to get off this rock. We're going to take it with us. So, part of what's probably preserved me in a bit from flopping too far to the left has been my Augustinian Calvinist roots, because Calvin sort of tried to do a redux of Augustine, as I think another book, Bret Sockold's excellent book, Transubstantiation, shows how, well, he tried, and, the 16th century didn't get everything right from the 4th century or the 11th century or the 12th century, and stuff was lost in translation, but we're always trying to recalibrate and get back to when we sort of had a clue on things, and that's what the IDW is trying to do too. But you have to understand that part of where the Enlightenment went wrong is they're a little too optimistic about human beings, and of course that came fully through the French Revolution, and of course came crashing down, which is usually what happens. So there are elements of Romanticism and Rousseau in here that, and of course, if you think about this too much, it just falls apart, because the noble savage, all of this stuff, it just doesn't work. But it's down there deep in the pattern and the code, and sort of the lefty populism that you'll hear out of Bret and Eric. There's a big part of that in here. That and in all fairness, a big part of that in Thomas Jefferson as well. And so that's in the code, and it's kind of dangerous in the code, because the anarchism that Bret is always whining about, that's part of that anarchism. And whereas Bret and Eric are a little bit better acquainted and a little bit more sober and a little bit more mature than Antifa, those in my meetup that always complain that Bret set the table with the knives plunged into him and his wife at Evergreen, that's part of their point, is that there's that homie, as Dave lays it out, that's a real deep part of the left, and it's really problematic, and it comes up again and again, and people just don't seem to have figured this out very well. But what I really want to talk about are institutions. Now, I was hoping that there it goes, now it'll play. I was really hoping that we could talk more about institutions. Hoping that we could talk more about it. Hoping that you'll listen to me talking, because I'm going to talk. Institution as pattern. That's really what institutions are. And you can go back to my earlier Voltron video, because this is the amazing thing that human beings do. Pack animals do it. Schools of fish do it. But human beings do it to such a degree that wolves and fish and these other elements, other animals in the world that can sort of, in a group be more than the sum of their parts. Okay. You might call that emergence. We've been talking about that, and I'm sure I'll talk about that more with J.P. Marceau and John Vervaeke later on. Institutions are formalized, semi-conscious Voltrons. Okay? What do I mean by that? Have you ever seen the I guess it's out. There's a new one out now, but it was out when I was in college, and we used to have watch parties for Voltron in the afternoon, and we just group of college kids just having a good time. But Voltron is, of course, these 5 lions, and there's some terrible monster that comes up, very archetypal. Jordan Peterson could really do a wonderful video on Voltron. some terrible monster comes, and each of the 5 lions sort of have the water lion and the earth lion. So you have these elemental aspects of it. And so the 5 lions sort of become the 2 arms and the 2 legs and then the body and the head. And the 5 lions first they do different things as the different lions. And of course, because of time and space, 5 can do different things than 1. But finally, when you have the showdown against the great enemy, the 5 lions come together to become Voltron, who now the animals become a human being, and he makes a sword, and he fights the beast, and Voltron wins the day. That's an institution. Institutions are like Voltron. And again, this saying that I said early on that really grabbed a lot of people, which I got from I got it from Crouch, who got it from Oz Guinness, who got it from, so it's been around a long time. Without individuals, nothing changes. You need individuals. Why? We'll get into what individuals are. What are persons? And without institutions, nothing lasts or nothing persists, because together what happens is that the different qualities of the different lions now and in the old commercial, it was always, you form the arms, form the legs, and I'll form the head. Well, what's with the head? Well, the head is the conscious thinking. The power of the lions now come together, and all together they can do more than alone. Okay? And that's what institutions do. Institutions outlive the age of decay. And marriage, which are these implicit institutions, or IBM or the Billy Graham evangelistic organization, outlives Billy Graham. Well, in some ways, maybe Billy Graham outlived it. Billy Graham lived a long time. But what these institutions do is they magnify and they multiply. And again, they're sort of like Sauron's ring. But again, as I made the point I made with respect to Eric Weinstein, they're created by patterns, and they're there to amplify and instantiate and make a pattern resistant to other patterns, which is why all of it's complaining about, there's all of these, these are new patterns coming online, creative people, and the institutions are resisting them. Of course, because the job of the institution to suss that out. Status does that too. Status binds and blinds. Whether Eric or Bret Weinstein will ever sit down for the 1+ hour to watch this video is questionable. Why? Because they, in a sense, are little institutions, and they have limited time and space, and so they probably won't watch this because they're resistant to my patterns trying to colonize their patterns. And that's the thing about human beings. I talked in my previous videos about when we're young, we are imprinted by our parents' relationships with each other, our parents' ways of being, our parents as parents, our parents as couples, our parents as political creatures, our parents as religious beings. We are imprinted by those patterns. Those patterns get into us and redo those patterns. Jordan Peterson talks about that with respect to religion, because that's what religions are. Religions are very long, very old patterns. And I remember as a little boy, my father was about my size, and I was a little boy, and my father wore size 12 shoes, and I remember as a little boy, I would go and I would put on his shoes, and I was tromp around the house in his shoes. What was I doing? I was working on absorbing his patterns. Now, some of his patterns are good and some of his patterns are bad, but I absorbed a lot of them. Now, some I got from my genetic material from my parents and ancestors, some I got from my parents, and they, of course, are the blends of those things too, which Bret, I think, really nicely brings out. But institutions are bringing this all together. Institutions allow personal patterns to defy human biological death, always imperfectly, but to what? And think about Jobs and Apple. So Steve Jobs and the other Steve, developed Apple. And then, of course, Steve Jobs left Apple, lost Apple, came back to Apple, and then reformed Apple, and Apple became what Apple is today. To what degree does Apple allow the personality of Steve Jobs to persist in the culture today? Well, read Isaacson's book on Steve Jobs. It's a wonderful biography. some of the things about Steve Jobs you don't want to have persistent to Apple. For example, Steve Jobs was resistant to the doctor's influence when they said, hey, you've got pancreatic cancer, but you've got a very treatable kind. So if we get at it right away, we can probably treat it and you'll be okay. Well, what did Steve Jobs do? Steve Jobs was looking at other patterns and said, oh, no, I want a much more organic solution. So he ate a lot of fruits and vegetables, hoping that would help his pancreatic cancer. And his doctors are like, it's not going to do anything to your pancreatic cancer. It's not going to do anything. So he resisted and he resisted and he resisted, and then he resisted too long. So when he finally allowed the medical establishment to work on him, it was too late, and then that cancer killed him. And it needn't have killed him if he had listened to his doctors, but the pattern that was Steve Jobs, which has been built into Apple, persisted. That's what institutions do. Now, unlike Voltron, the lions don't completely lose their individuality, agency, and personality. You can only get so much into this like 19-minute anime cartoon for kids. But Steve Jobs and Apple Corporations, well, Apple Corporation was not just Steve Jobs. Steve Jobs, in many ways, for a while, was the head. But it should be noticed that what institutions do are allow other personalities to come in, to expand the bandwidth, because we individuals we're amazing, amazing creatures, but we're pretty limited. And so multiple individuals can sort of flesh something out. And in an institution, that's part of the power of the institution too. You should be noticing that persons are also patterns. And so aspect of the Steve Jobs patterns got into Apple and has created Apple for what it is. But of course, Steve Jobs, and Kanye West is one of the great examples of this. Kanye is this insane pattern imbiber, and then he shoots them out in different ways. So does Alex Jones. That's what Alex Jones does. So does Joe Rogan. Joe Rogan is an excellent example of it, and you can watch Joe Rogan. Somebody made a comment section on my Kanye video about how when Richard Dawkins was recently on Joe Rogan and talked about God, and Joe Rogan was yucking about all those stupid Christians. But then when Kanye comes in, and then another boxer, I forget his name right now, that was on recently, somebody pointed that video to me. See, this is the beauty of low status, because y'all are having a much easier time colonizing me. And I'm learning tons from you. And the higher status you go, it binds and blinds. You have less time. You have to be more careful about what you say, yada, yada, yada. And that's why, if you're the CEO of a company, generally speaking, you have to be careful about what you say and do. But now, notice how sometimes the most effective leaders are not bound and blinded so much by their institutions. Jobs was a jerk. Read about it. Read Isaacson's biography. It's a great biography. Jobs was a jerk. Donald Trump is a terrific example of this. But so Peterson would often talk about personalities. Well, that's a personality. That's a personality. What's a personality? Personality is a pattern as well. You say, well, Paul, everything's a pattern. Yeah, kind of, but you have to figure out different things are sort of different patterns. Okay? So personality, and what we're getting into is the formal cause here, basically. I mean, it's in Aristotle. So personality is a matrix of patterns, but it's smaller than a person. And so each of us have personalities, and we have multiple personalities within us. And in fact, that was a really good part, I think, of the Lex conversation with Eric Weinstein, when Eric was talking about Peter Thiel and the multiple personalities within Peter Thiel. Now some people are powerful because they're not multiple personalities. They're more one thing, or their personalities are really fully integrated and they really Voltron up themselves. Other people are powerful because their personalities stay fairly distinct, but they can sort of dive into them sometimes, in and out and in and out and in and out. And that's what he was talking about with respect to Peter Thiel. And it's a really important insight. So when you look at Apple Corporation, it's not just Steve Jobs, it's also Johnny Ives. Well, who was Johnny Ives? Well, he was a designer. And you'll notice Johnny, G-O-N-Y, I thought, he did to his name what he keeps doing to products. He keeps taking buttons off them, and buttons are useful. So get ready, Apple fans. I don't know if they'll do an iPhone 13, if that'll be lucky or unlucky, but one of these years they're going to take that little charging port off your iPhone, and you're going to miss it. Anyway, I've always loved tech blogs and tech. My first podcast, I was a big podcast listener. I didn't listen to any culture podcasts like these. I just listen to tech podcasts all the time. So I still follow some of those. He not only takes off the buttons, but takes the letters off his name. But Johnny Ives left Apple so the institution could deviate from part of his pattern. And now I was just talking to one of my son's girlfriends, and she's in the cult of Apple. I feel sorry for her. But she's got an Apple phone, and she's thinking about her next Apple phone. And, well, Apple has an iPhone at every price point now. Used to be Apple would be like one SKU. This is iPhone, not even the. The was too much, just iPhone. Iconic. Steve Jobs, Johnny Ives. But now you've got Tim Cook. And, Apple will continue to change. Will it grow stronger? Will it grow weaker? Well, that's what the stock market is always trying to figure out. But institutions are patterns, and they embody personal patterns, or they embody and resist personal patterns. Now, again, the point I made, institutions and mavericks, which, of course, Apple named one of their operating systems Mavericks. Institutions resist mavericks and innovators. They both highlight them and amplify them, but they also resist them. Many institutions try to incorporate the spirit of innovation, but all innovation is the introduction of a new pattern, and this is why institutions rise and fall, because by virtue of the institution, they're trying to instantiate a pattern. And again, in fairness to Bret Weinstein and the comment he made to Jordan Peterson, contexts change. But the thing is, we don't always know how the contexts change. And this is Vervaeke's relevance realization and how it intersects with Darwin. And so we're always living in this very living moment, and institutions are part of that. And since institution is a set of patterns, some patterns need to die in order that other patterns live. And life, now get a definition of life here, which is really hard to define. Life, evolution, relevance realization, adaptation is all about managing this sort of change, conflict, transition. That's what living things do. Living things colonize, institutionalize, they change their environment, and they change themselves in order to. That's sort of what life is. It's a pretty good definition of life. Now, Jordan Peterson, and I found it once, I found it twice, and I have to go back and look for it because I really want to, I would play it in almost every video. He has this point when he's talking in the Sam Harris debates, and I don't remember if it's in 1, 2, 3, or 4, but he makes the point, I think it's in 1 or 2, because I think Bret was there, change too much and you die, change too little and you die. And that's true for institutions, it's true for civilizations, it's true for individuals. Except individuals have this biological aspect that institutions are up here in the culture net. Institutions are not, they're deeply connected and intertwined with biology, but they're up here in the heavenlies. And we're going to get into that in a minute. And so life is a productive engagement with the environment by which the individual organism and their community, Voltron, creates new patterns hospitable to the further colonization into that environment, hopefully without destroying the capacity of that environment to host more of it. And that's in many ways what we're dealing with in terms of the physical environment, CO2. And I know, okay, climate change skeptics, make your comments, fine. But whether it's on a little scale that you can pollute, whether it's cutting down all the trees on Easter Island, whatever it is, that's why life is so dangerous, because we're colonizers and we keep colonizing. And actually, Bret has one of his earlier videos where he talked about like these open spaces and going into them. I thought that was an outstanding video. I learned a ton from that video. So again, all of my critique of these guys, don't misunderstand me. I'm big fans. But, I'm too old and I don't have enough time to just sit back and not do my own critiquing of it. So change too much, you die. Change too little, you die. And the same as institutions, same for everything. But now, Jordan Peterson also had this great line where why you think about things, why you exaptation, a word I learned from John Vervaeke, about how we use our visual cortex and all this mental stuff, and we use it imaginatively. And so we, in a sense, travel imaginatively into the future, and we have our ideas die so we don't. So, and again, a friend on Twitter keeps, lauding the praises of psychedelics. The problem with psychedelics is they're too much up here. And what life is about the marriage of heaven and earth. It's Christianity promotes the resurrection of the body, not the escape of the body. Okay? And that's why anything that's too far up here gets lost. And in many ways, part of the brilliance of the Enlightenment was an attempt to bring things back down and reintegrate the body and reintegrate the physical world, because Protestantism in some ways were just floated up too far and became too psychological, too Gnostic. But now some old Gnostic patterns have reemerged, as I've been mentioning, with respect to the IDW and Enlightenment promoters. Now, if you go back into my videos, you'll notice I've been talking about patterns and spirits, and the example I use of that is school spirit. What is school spirit? And why do we use the word spirit for it? Because spirit is we don't know what it is. Spirit is what it is. School spirit, where does school spirit comes from? Well, gosh, there's innumerable sources of school spirit. There's the civilization. There's the location. There's the individuals. There are the sub-communities. There are the religious communities. There's the technology. All of this, I use C.K. McClatchy High School, which is a school here in Sacramento. And again, to make it more powerful, use a specific example. That's very real to me because it's a real school. And I knew something of the school spirit because my kids went there. I could use Eastern Christian High School in New Jersey better. Yes, me, Peter Kreeft, and a whole bunch of pop stars are distinguished alumni of Eastern Christian. Somebody should add that to their Wikipedia page. Nobody's put me on Wikipedia yet. What's with my fan base? Have I not given enough? Have you not been entertained? Where's my Wikipedia page? Come on, get started. Someone's going to do it. It's probably going to be Luke or Job and I'm a little nervous about what's going to go up there now. Anyway, so school spirit. It's a deep pattern that we all recognize, but especially in our materialist frame, we're sort of hard pressed to say, well, what is it? Well, it's spirit. And this is where we bump into our biases from our secularized, materialistic, naturalistic biases, because even if you're deeply religious, there's somebody back in your consciousness committee that says, no, don't say that. Don't say that in public. We get itchy about the supernatural. What is spirit? Because everything's supposed to be material. That day is done. The day is done. Oh, it'll linger for a few hundred years, but it's pretty much done. In a little bit, I'm going to show you why it's done. So school spirit, it's a deep pattern that is colonized and created by hosts of people, and then it in turn colonizes and creates hosts more. So spirits are pattern initiators because, well, the spirit of Eastern Christian lives on in me in some small ways. And if we have a class reunion, we'll rejoin it. Now, this language is absolutely correct. It's absolutely correct. It's absolutely the right word, and we didn't know we were using the right word, and that's because words are sloshy. You say, well, what about fudgy? Well, I will, for the first time, because I couldn't do it until I did this, connect fudgy and sloshy. Well, how do we use the correct language when we don't know why the language is correct? I'm going to say that again because it's really important to really let it sink in. How do we use the correct language when we don't know why the language is correct? It's sort of like Jordan Peterson's question about information in dreams. How can I have knowledge in my head that I, the little conscious member of my consciousness Congress, doesn't know about? Well, that's what Freud and Jung and the depth psychologist got into. We know stuff we don't know. And that comes out in our language. We betray stuff and we reveal stuff. The old Freudian slip. We reveal things we don't know because language is sloshy. What do I mean? It's sort of moving around. We don't have a handle on it. We can't grab it. What is sloshing? Sloshing is liquid in a bucket. You can sort of hold the bucket, but you can't control the liquid. And if you walk around with it, it sloshes out, it spills out, other spills in. We're really sloshy creatures. And the mystery of sloshy language is the mystery of how we know things we can't know. And it's just, that's betrayed by our language because we use the right word, sometimes the wrong word, but we use the right word for the thing, like school spirit. Fudgy is sloshy with intent. Okay? So I fudge when I don't know, but I'm going to act like I know. And again, over in the Discord server, I talk about Andrea with the bangs. She has her own YouTube channel. Her superpower, I don't really like that term, I would say her spiritual gift as a pastor is she's not fudgy. When she doesn't know something, she says it. Now, this is involved in lots of aspects about her as a personality, but that's why I like the interview she does, because she's not fudgy. She just says, if she doesn't know something, she says it. She says what's on her mind. There's not a lot of layers with her. And that's a real gift. And that's why in her interview with, I thought her interview with why can't I think of his name? Rebel Wisdom. David. Her interview with David was, I thought, outstanding because she's a good interviewer because she just asks honest questions. It's really good. So she's not fudgy, but she's plenty sloshy. And again, how do we use the correct language when we don't know why the language is correct? It's because it's sloshy and because we know more than we know. And it takes a while, which is why I do these videos, because, again, I do these videos for me. And that you watch them and enjoy them and support this channel is a really big deal. Because it says, well, we can maybe be a little less sloshy and less fudgy and learn a few things along the way. We are pattern recognizers and perpetuators, even unselfconsciously. That is what a human being is. And we see that in children. We see that in each other. We see it in ourselves. Okay, back to institutions. Institutions, like schools, which are institutions too, have spirits. There's the spirit of Apple. And the spirit of Apple is very present. You know, the cult of Apple, the cult of Google. There is a religion to Apple. And a big part of why Apple has been successful has been their religion, their religio. They bind themselves to a degree of simplicity. I'm kind of an Apple critic. I do own an iPad. I did fix up and have my old mother, my mother doesn't watch these videos. My mother's old MacBook Pro. I don't have an iPhone, and I'm not really an anti-Apple snob. I would have an iPhone, but I like the anti-institutional wide open spaces of Android better. Maybe when Linux has phones. I know they do. But they have spirits too. And so Apple is very religious, and people are very religious about Apple. And the spirit of Steve Jobs is sort of a prophet. Steve Jobs and Johnny Ives is alive and well there. We all know we create them, these spirits. We all know we can perpetuate them, and spirits are really hard to kill. Okay. Now, again, I put a clip in my channel from one of the Q&As about this because when I talk this way, Christians who have a set of patterns that, because of the modernist fundamentalist fight, have seriously invested in the ontology and some eschatological images of spirits get really nervous when I talk this way, but that's why I use school spirit. Or my Living Stones has its own spirit, and Apple has its own spirit. These have spirits, okay? They're principalities and powers, and we participate in them. Now, when it comes to the origin of spirits, well, that's where the conversation really gets interesting. But I'm not going to go there too much today, okay? Maybe with Jonathan Peugeot a little bit more, because, I've learned a lot of this from Jonathan Peugeot. Or I don't know how much I've learned it from him, but he got me going on the road. And I've sort of added a bunch of things along the way. But this came out in Jordan Peterson's talk with Sam Harris again, think about the quality channel that's in our little corner on the internet. Where is the quality or the value of Elton John's glass? Where's the quality of Elvis's guitar? It's not in the guitar. Jordan was asking all these questions. It's not in the guitar. And he was pushing these questions in the context of Sam Harris's metaphysic or lack of one. Where's the quality in Elvis's guitar? And there's a reason Sevilla, who was reading Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance, grabbed onto this. And again, I was just stumbling into this stuff, but now that I've been stumbling around it, I've been learning. Things have gotten a little less sloshy for me, and so these are spirits, and so in some ways, the spirit of Elton John continues somewhere with respect to that glass, and the spirit of Elvis continues somewhere with respect to that guitar, and one way to think about ghosts is that the patterns. Now, I'm not a ghost skeptic. There seems to be just way too much information about ghosts out there to not believe in them. And if you don't believe me, do a little internet search, find the particular rooms to stay in the Del Toronado in San Diego. Just do Del Toronado haunted, and you'll find it. And there's some rooms there that it's been told to me, again, this has all been suppressed by our culture, and a lot of the BS of it wrung out. I mean, let's give the Amazing Randy and the Enlightenment its due, because there was way too much of that running around, and the Protestant Reformation and the Enlightenment decided to take a stick to it and bring some discipline to it, and it's good. And actually, religion has benefited and profited because of that adversarial spirit that got a lot of the BS out of the woo. Okay, we're going to talk about woo a little bit later. But where is all of this being hosted? Now, you might say the intersubjective. Okay, well, that's helpful, but that's still a little thin. Where is this stuff being hosted? So, and this is what we get at with Uncle Sam or Santa Claus or the spirit of a marriage. And I once in a meetup once, I was talking about this, and I encouraged them. I said, why don't we name our marriages? I kind of stopped. Why don't we name our marriages? Why don't you represent your marriage in an archetype or a name or a representation? What would it be? If you had to relate your marriage as a movie, what movie would it be? If you had to relate your marriage as a decade or maybe a year, is your marriage 2020? Because 2020 now, I just saw on Twitter, I just retweeted it, this outstanding video from Barcelona of somebody just playing this delightful music in the back, the police cars, and people are throwing stuff at him. And I mean, it's just absolute chaos. And this dude just plays through, and he keeps fixing his mask, and another dude behind him, and the woman next to him, no mask. I mean, it's just, and the tweet was best video ever. Why? Because it represented a year. Well, what represents your marriage? You have a name. Churches have names. Marriages, well, if you had to represent your marriage, what would it be? You probably don't want to broadcast that too widely, because it might be something you'd say in a therapist's office. Maybe in terms of marriage counseling, that would be a good. And pastors, of course, we play these kind of tricks with people, and okay, sitting down with a couple that's unhappy for various reasons, how would you describe your marriage? And see what it would be. So these are patterns and spirits. And this is why I say materialism is dead, because once you ask the question, where is Elvis's glass or Elvis's guitar? Where is the Elvisness in the guitar? Well, it's in history, yeah. But it's got power, yeah. You know it has power because people will bid for it at Sotheby's. It colonizes history. Well, look at shrines, okay? Look at Canterbury Tales and heading to the shrine of Thomas a Becket. That continues to colonize Tom Holland. If you look at his interview with Glenn Scrivener. Why do, La Virgen de la Alta Gracia in the Dominican Republic, why does Mary keep showing up? Well, what's going on? Where is that stuff? Now, this idea of just dismissing it, which the Enlightenment got into, and again, there was a lot that needed to get wrung out because there was a lot of BS going on. But we're not, again, relevance realization, we're not real good about figuring out what's BS and what isn't BS. And so if you're really dogmatic about that on both sides of it, you should probably find a little humility. And I knew this so again, unbelievable, wonderful program. Justin Brierley, hero of mine. Justin Brierley has Daniel Dennett and Keith Ward in for a little chat, like Justin Brierley does. And, well, what's reality? And Daniel Dennett says, matter plus information. Psh. That's like the Pope saying there is no God. He gave up the game. It's done. Put a lid on it. Heather and Bret, they're going to church or synagogue. It's going to happen. It's done. It's done. Secularity is on its last legs. Naturalism, going out the door. Daniel Dennett gave up the game, didn't even know it. Why? Once you have information, you have the spiritual world. Where is the Elvisness in the guitar? Where is the Elton Johnness in the glass? It's in the spiritual realm. It's in the patterns. Well, we know patterns when the pattern is in the cell phone stand. Well, here's a pattern, and we have patterns going way, way down in this. But it's the pattern. Where is the pattern? Where is the formal cause? Where is it? Well, it's right here, yeah. But it didn't come from here. Well, it came to here. But what is the pattern? What is a pattern? Well, math is kind of a language of pattern, but where is the math? Laws of nature are patterns. That's what they are. And they're spiritual. Where are the laws of nature? Well, we see them manifest. We see matter in formation, formation, information. We see matter in formation all around us. But what's causing the information? What's causing the shape of the school? It's the school spirit. It's spiritual. That's the word we use. Again, we know stuff in our language and we know how to use it and we don't know that we're using it, but it's there. And so if you take a step back and you look at it, there it is. Where are these patterns? I'll use this word again. Part of it's these new tools that we have. Where are they hosted? Are they in the cloud? Why did we use the cloud for that metaphor? Why are they in the heavenlies? Materialism and naturalism is dead. It just doesn't know it yet. It's a zombie. Ultimate reality is the pattern host. There it is. There it is. And what name do we have for that? It's God. That's the name. That's the word. It's in your language. You just don't know it. You might be an atheist, but like Jordan Peterson, skeptical. You don't know it. Ultimate reality is in the pattern host. God is agentic. That's God number 2. And God is arenic. That's God number 1. The agency arena that John Vervaeke talks about. God is arenic. He's got that quality. He's also agentic. He's got that quality. And we can get attributes and energies. Yeah, thanks, Strawn. Strawn is a very helpful guy, and I haven't responded to a couple of your last emails, but I have seen the title, and I often don't open them until I know I've got a minute to actually read them, Strawn. So hats off to Strawn. Some of you know who Strawn is. Lots of you don't. He watches my videos, and so he'll get this message. I know you will, Strawn, and we should talk again. But one of these days we should record our talk, because you're doing that now. He's over on the Vervaeke Discord and the Vervaeke question and answer channels, because he's the one that turned me on to Vervaeke, so he's a big Vervaeke fan. And John knows who he is too. See, it's important who you're known by. That's very biblical, Strawn. I'm going to make you a Christian yet. Of course, God is personal. Persons are deep patterns, pattern replicators, pattern initiators. That's what persons are. That's what person is. We are made in God's image. That's what that talks about. We host patterns. We are the first drafts of our parents. We host our descendants' patterns in our biology and in how we live. The two tracks that Bret Weinstein and Dave Sloan Wilson talks about. Those are the two tracks. Matter, information. Again, I couldn't believe it. Daniel, I'm just driving around, because I listen to a lot of the stuff if I'm driving or doing stuff, and I'm just driving around, and what is reality? Matter plus information. Psh, done, 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 done. It's boring, and it's done. It's done. It's just done. God. The ultimate reality is the pattern host. God is agentic, that's God number 2, and Arenic, God number 2. Again, I always said that these God number 1 and God, why do you keep it God number 1 and God number 2 and not use other words for it? Because they're little buckets on my workbench that I throw things in and take things out and try and figure it out. That's why I keep them. That's why I don't have them labeled. Okay. But I think the agent arena stuff has really sort of helped me with it. And so God is agentic, that's God number 2, and Arenic, that's God number 1. But so God is personal. He's agentic, God number 2, because persons are deep patterns, pattern replicators, pattern initiators, and we're made in God's image. We host patterns and we initiate patterns like we initiate institutions. God's also Arenic. And this again is the work of Kaufman, which unfortunately my videos have destroyed, or for those who actually hold copies. Yeah, here's a little market thing. I bought this used. Paid maybe $10 for it. It's like the only used copies out there are like $500-$600. So my little channel cornered the market on this book. I'm so pleased about that. That's so much fun. I feel very agentic. I feel my agency, I feel that's reciprocal broadening of my agency. Corner the market on that little book. Anyway, God is also, until they start making more, and then the bottom will fall out. God is also Arenic, and that's the Ezekiel Kaufman, Christine Hayes aspect of God, God number 1. In him we live and move and have our being. Someone is hosting the laws of nature. And again, when Rupert Sheldrake said, why do they have an institution that tracks constants? If they're constant, you wouldn't need an institution. They'd always be the same, right? Oh, Rupert Sheldrake, you pesky man who asks uncomfortable scientific questions. So much woo. Variability of the crucial constants, the fine-tuning argument. Sheldrake makes that point. Good on you. So God is the ultimate reality, is the pattern host. He's agentic and Arenic. He's personal, and he's Arenic. Now, Eric Weinstein, we are unhappy with the patterns. We all are. We are. And what we do when we're unhappy is we whine. And watch Jonathan Peugeot's video on complaint. It's a great video. It's a great point. I mean, almost every time Jonathan opens up his mouth, I learn something. And it's not, again, when I first started making videos about Jordan Peterson, suddenly people were talking to me about Jonathan Peugeot, and I went to his channel, I start listening. It's like, what's he talking about? And the more I listened, the more I learned, and the more I understood. And Jonathan Peugeot even made the point, I couldn't have had this channel 10 years ago because basically modernity hadn't receded sufficiently to expose or to afford us the capacity to understand him. But now it does. So Eric's unhappy with the patterns. We all are. He wants to change them, but he's being resisted. We all are. So, that's why we whine. God is, of course, the ultimate pattern resistor. Oh, you're bringing the G word into it. Yeah, I am. And the time has come. And because Jordan Peterson was right, it's the only way to talk about this. It's the only way that you can productively talk about it. Now, you got to be a little careful talking about it. And again, Jordan Peterson was right on that too, because we're still dealing with the amount of modernity that we have in our system. And as the IDW and others like, James Lindsay, who I've only talked to him once, but I have lots of warm feelings for James Lindsay and really cheer him on. That there's some things that we are going to lose about modernity that we had better not forget. I think about Gandalf. Some things were better not forgotten. Well, there's a lot in modernity we should not forget because they were bought at a terrible price and they're worth keeping, and let's keep them. But figuring out what to keep and what to throw away, we have the same process with Christianity and the Reformation and the Enlightenment and. We're always in this process. That's what life is. Figuring out what to keep, figuring out what to get rid of. That's what happens in your body. Everything you put in your mouth, your body figures out what to keep, what to get rid of. That's life, right? That's life. God is of course, and he's a living God. God is, of course, the ultimate pattern resistor. That's why Jacob wrestled with God. God seems to like it. He does. So, modernity is going away. I know y'all get hives when you talk about religion, but it's time to get some calamine lotion. Now, one of the most interesting things, so I had a really interesting conversation with Bret Sockold, the author of, that's Len Van de Zee's book. Bret Sockold, the author of Transubstantiation, which is germane to this, about conspiracy theories, because Eric is right. People conspire, but and I actually read that book. Eric did a podcast with the author of the book on conspiracy, who wrote about the conspiracy of Peter Thiel. It was an excellent book. I really enjoyed it. And Eric did a conversation with that guy, and I can't remember his name right now. And that was a cool thing because the guy's into Stoicism, and that was interesting because I talked to Peter Lindbergh and the Stoa and on and on and on and on and on and on and on. Okay? Conspiracy theories are sort of a dismissive thing, sort of like mentioning God in the public square. Oh, conspiracy. And Eric is right. Conspiracies are real. They are. And Eric works for Peter Thiel, and so he should have an understanding about conspiracies because Peter Thiel pulled one off with Hulk Hogan and Gawker. It's a great read. It's a great read. And it's an audiobook too, so you can listen to it. It's a fun book. But now the weakness of his complaint is that, okay, think about Peter Thiel and his conspiracy. Where was the conspiracy located? Well, some of it was in Peter Thiel's brain. A good part of it was. But some of it was not inside Peter Thiel either. It was between people. It was spiritual. And so the conspiracy had its own spirit. Now, unless Eric Weinstein has some information, and he's really coy in this Lex conversation about, well, I know things that I'm not going to say. It sounds just like sounds just like Donald J. Trump. It was pretty amazing. Well, I know things. You think I'm going to say it here? Wasn't that Donald Trump's answer to how many things about, what are your plans? Think I'm going to say them here? And at one point, he has a point. On the other hand, it's sort of this coy little move, and it's sort of annoying. So the weakness of his complaint is that he keeps inviting us to imagine what he is complaining about are located in human individuals at the top. Well, maybe they are. But here's the thing. Maybe they're not. Because why does Google keep my channel, and in fact, the video I just released today, I first had some other milquetoast title to it, but my conversation with this guy, the thing that I got out of that conversation is he said, because I always ask people, how did you find my channel? It's a small channel. And usually it's, well, I was watching Jordan Peterson videos and Google put your channel up there. And this guy said, I was watching Stefan Molyneux videos and your Google put your channel up there, and Stefan Molyneux isn't on YouTube anymore, and so I watch yours. And I thought, where's the intersection between me and Stefan Molyneux? That's a really interesting question. Because Stefan was, of course, deplatformed. And on one hand, I think Eric is right, that there are real people sitting in real rooms making real decisions about this. And he knows better than I do what goes on in Silicon Valley boardrooms because he's had way more experience with those people than I have. I live in Sacramento. I'm a little ways away. However, I also understand that spirits, principalities, patterns also emerge and get instantiated in institutions and between institutions. Again, it's sort of like, again, I used to listen to a lot of tech podcasts, and they talk about the big telecoms and price fixing. Why is it that Verizon and AT&T and T-Mobile, their prices are, because free market's supposed to, and are they doing price fixing, yada, 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 yada. Well, on one hand, it's just, if you're an executive at AT&T, you keep your eye on what T-Mobile and Verizon are doing with respect to their prices and their sales, and you tinker with them. Is that price fixing? Oh, but it's only price fixing that you get in trouble if you all sit in a meeting and talk about it directly. And the law is shaped the way it is, but for a reason. But these patterns are beyond it, and I think Eric needs to add to his nomenclature. I think he needs to talk about spirit, because I don't think the Democratic Party this time around, how much did they want Joe Biden? Parts of it did. The Republicans certainly didn't want Donald Trump. They wanted Rubio or Ted Cruz, right? Wasn't that, who the Republicans should have nominated in 2016? There are principalities and powers at work in the world. Now, when I say it that way, suddenly you get nervous because I'm a materialist, and you what? You don't think there's anything out there besides us moving stuff, and all of this is projection, human projection up into the clouds? No. Then what is it? Well, we don't know. We have words for it. It's spiritual. And even if you're an ardent materialist or a naturalist, you keep using that word. And Sam Harris, to try and, avoid status loss by being a naturalist, well, I have a meditation app. All right, well, what are you doing with that app, huh? Where's that going? Once you get information, where is the information of the natural laws kept, hosted, perpetuated, maintained? God number one and God number two. So conspiracy theories are very spiritual, and they're risky. And whereas, again, in the Reformation and the Enlightenment, it beat out a lot of bullshittery and places needed to be beat out of. Yeah, there's a few too many fragments of the cross. Peter has a few too many heads and brains rolling around. If you're gonna play with the interplay between heaven and earth, you got to have a little bit of accountability, and that accountability is good. But you can't just seal it off. That's the outbreak of the really good idea of looking. Oh, that's a bird. That's a bird outside my door. I thought it was a homeless person. Of putting a hand over one eye and seeing the world, taking out personality to find really simple, very repeatable, very durable patterns. That's what science is. Science is an attempt to find durable, multiplied patterns and then project those patterns out into the world. But that's what people do too. But people do it at levels that science can't do. And we all know that because you don't have time to do science with your marriage. Maybe you get a therapist and they'll do a little bit of marriage science. But what are you doing when you go into a therapist's office? You're looking for patterns in you. But you are a way, way complex pattern creature than most of the patterns we're dealing with, like getting hydrogen and oxygen out of water. But Eric is right to focus on institutions. Okay, so I've been playing with Eric and calling him Eric Weinstein and doing all this stuff, but he's right to focus on institutions, and I think that's one of the real to whatever degree the IDW stuff is still alive. That really, I think, was his contribution. This is a weakness in Jordan Peterson's attempting to manage change and a very large pattern matrix, which is civilization. Without individuals, nothing changes. Without institutions, nothing persists. Many of these changes are located in the heavenlies. They're in the cloud. They're where are they hosted? Well, we don't really have access to it. We have evidence that it is hosted. It is there. Where do they come from? Well, we keep making up stories. What is that? Religion. As human beings, we're amazing patterned creatures, but that's what we're doing. We're telling stories about where the patterns come from. Many of these changes are located in the heavenlies. Now, to what degree? Now we're going to get into the bias. Now, this is the ancient location of the great ancient pattern makers and pattern hosts. They're in the heavenlies. That's the language we use. Now, I want to talk about institutions. The evolution of civilization is seen in institutions. Now, reality, and even something smaller than reality like civilization, seeing reality is really hard because it's too large and we're pattern seeing patterns and we are small. We can't see God or we'll die. What does that mean? It means our head will explode. Remember Raiders of the Lost Ark? They look into the Ark and their heads explode? Symbolism happens. Now, were the people who were doing Raiders of the Lost Ark, maybe some had it shrink. Well, maybe that was it too. You see that with some religious people. Anyway, the closer they get to their idols, their heads shrink. Anyway, you can't see God or you will die. You need to track smaller things in order to see larger patterns. Institution. What is the mother of all institutions? It's the Roman Catholic Church. And again, I'm reading this book, Reformations, and well, what happens? Now he starts the beginning of the Reformation period when they broke ground for the Vatican, the renewed St. Peter's Cathedral. And the author of Reformations, that's a really smart choice. And the book ends when the cathedral was completed. That's a really smart choice. Because in some ways, institutions are what we see as institutions, which was by that point instantiated by the Roman Catholic Church, but had been instantiated by the Catholic Church since, because the other St. Peter's Basilica was built when? In the 4th century, late antiquity. So you have late antiquity, the late medieval period, early modernity. Now we're in late modernity, where again, we're in one of these transition phases. And notice all the attention we're paying to someone like Tom Holland, late antiquity. The late medieval period, early modernity. Now we're in late modernity. Institutions, the modern institutions began, in some ways, with the Vatican. Now, we had medieval institutions going all the way back to late antiquity. Late antiquity picked up from the crumbling Roman Empire. And I've made videos before, and I want to go back to Constantine. And why would they name that comic book character Constantine? Oh, boy. This is good. It's really woo. I'm going to do my best Alex Jones. So the Roman Catholic Church is a good institution. It's the ancient institution. It's the biggest institution. And it's a pattern, okay? And there's many, 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 many nested sub-patterns. And that's why the pedophile priest pattern is so critical in terms of understanding the Roman Catholic Church. And it's so important in terms of understanding what's happening in the Catholic Church. And on and on and on. It slowly colonized the Roman Empire, fossilized aspects. Pontus. So in the little paper that I wrote for Vervaeke, I was, Pontus. What is Pontus? Pontus is the bridge. Well, in the pagan world, pre-institution of the Roman Catholic Church, the Pontus was the emperor. Pharaoh was the Pontus. He was a bridge between the spiritual world and Egypt. And why do you have an obelisk? Why do you have a pyramid? They're connecting heaven and earth. That's what a pyramid did. That's what the tombs do. That's the statuary. That's all mechanics to connect heaven and earth. Why did we build towers for so long? Why does Satan bring Jesus up to the highest mountain and offer him the world? Why does God come down on Sinai? What's with the Sermon on the Mount? So the Pontus is the bridge. Well, who's the Pontus now? It's the Pope. We don't talk about, we had in the 18th century, had the divine right that kind of reached its peak in the 18th century, but still had Christianity still below the king. And then now, the American sister, we have a paper Pontus. The Constitution is the paper Pope. Now, Eric, in some ways, and the IDW, and I think Dr. Jim up in Idaho, the cardiologist, was exactly right. Eric is a canary in a coal mine. So for those of you listening to the podcast, I took a picture of archetypal miner dude with his hat and his light with this little cage with a little canary, and I just clipped out Eric's head and I put it on the canary. No highfalutin graphics work needed here, just cut and paste. The Roman Catholic Church adopted and adapted Roman ways. They took in Roman patterns, and it's all throughout the Roman Catholic Church, and perpetuated them in Europe. And in some ways, Rome conquered the world through the Roman Catholic Church. Think about that. Now, some of you are like, well, not so fast. We have our seas of orthodoxy, and the Protestants, not so fast. We rebel. We're protesting. But are we ever going to come back into the fold? And a bunch of you are like, Paul will. The Roman Catholic adopted and adapted Roman ways and perpetuated them in Europe and through the colonial period around the world. They're the mother of all institutions. And the technology, the innovation might be changing these large patterns. It has. It's continuing to change. That's why technology is such a disruptor. And again, the book in the book, The Reformations, I should put it. If I don't put Reformations in the link, ask in the comment section early on, and I should be able to put it in. My channel's small enough that I can read a lot of the comments. I read a lot of the first comments when y'all get discussing things like deep. I don't often read all those because you're going on your own rabbit trails and have at it, but there's only so much time in the world, and status binds and blinds, even my little status. But technology comes into this because, well, it's about the time they founded we're going to refit what is now Vatican City. The printing press also started. And the Columbian Exchange, as Thomas Mann calls it, in 1493, and globalization begins, and it all began at the same time. Start at the end of the 15th century into the 16th century. Enormous change going on. That enormous change has continued to speed up, and it's going now. And hey, in all fairness to Bret and Eric's whining, yeah, this could kill us all. But again, I'm a Christian, and so I ask questions. Well, where are the patterns hosted? And when the pattern that is Paul Vanderklay is disconnected from his biological pattern, see, Christians believe in resurrection. Then I'm going to be reconnected with my biological pattern. Well, how's that going to work? You can hear Jordan Peterson say, God only knows. What is the meaning of Donald J. Trump? Because Donald J. Trump was a significant break in the institutional patterns, which is why people really hated him and loved him. Because America wanted a break in the institutional patterns. And I think the longer Eric Weinstein thinks about Donald Trump, I think some of his softening on Trump is part of that, because a lot of the patterns that Eric is complaining about, Donald Trump has embodied the breaking of. But Donald Trump's an equal opportunity pattern breaker. He breaks a lot of patterns, and he reinstantiates some very ancient patterns. Now, one of the things that I had in my sermon this last Sunday, and my Sunday sermon changed a fair amount from my rough draft, so if you want to see the Sunday sermon, it's on the church website. It's not on the church website yet. I have to do that this afternoon. It's on the church YouTube channel. And the sound isn't very good yet on the church YouTube channel. Rick and I continue to work on the technology here at Living Stones World Headquarters. I think we had, 15 people in for church on Sunday? Donald J. Trump was a significant break in institutional patterns, for good or for ill. Both, probably. Something deeply ancient in an individual about his reign. And, Donald Trump, before he was president, did beauty contests, right? Read the book of Esther. King Ahasuerus, which is probably, Xerxes or Artaxerxes, I don't remember off the top of my head. King Ahasuerus, which is sort of a play on King Headache. And Queen Vashti. And then finding Esther and having her, a beauty pageant all throughout the empire. And this was Donald Trump's fantasy. If he got to bed, all the beauty pageants contestants, Donald Trump wishes he lived way back, in the 5th century, because then he'd get to sleep with all the beauty contests, all the beauty pageant contestants. And that's sort of how he's led his sex life, Stormy Daniels and that other woman who was a Playboy model. That's Donald. Donald is an ancient potentate. He's in the wrong century, but he's also, this is where institutions get interesting, because patterns change very slowly. And there's a lot of back and forth. And so in some ways, Donald Trump is anti-institutional. That's been obvious of his presidency. Donald Trump does what Donald Trump wants to. And whether it helps his campaign or hurts his campaign, there's no one to thank for Donald Trump's presidency more than Donald Trump. And if he loses, there'll be no one to blame more than Donald Trump. And, Chris Christie, if you watch him on ABC on Sunday morning, he's one of the few people I still like to watch on Sunday morning. I like watching him and Ron Emanuel go at it. That's fun. Chris Christie, I think, has Donald Trump pegged. Donald Trump is Donald Trump. You might hate him. He's not the devil. And, I agree with some of the stuff that Andrew Sullivan and Sam Harris. Again, politically, I'm a part of this group. Religiously, I'm a little out of step, but politically, I'm a part of this group. Donald Trump is Donald Trump. Hate him, love him. He is who he is. But what's also interesting about him was his use of platforms. Now, I want to differentiate platforms from institutions, because platforms, especially these social media platforms, are sort of institutions tremendously open to colonization to a certain degree. And that's exactly where Eric Weinstein is sort of trying to figure out. They're sort of like institutions, but the institution of the Roman Catholic Church or the Christian Reformed Church or Living Stones Church or IBM or Apple, Apple sort of has a platform, but I remember when Apple was taking things off the Apple, the Play Store, okay? Because the Manhattan group of conservative Christians that were against gay marriage had an app on the App Store, and Apple took it off. Well, is that justice or is that oppression? Which is it? Apple is a platform as well as an institution. But you have things like Twitter that Donald Trump, again, the idea was that, once Donald Trump became president, his Twitter would become presidential. Well, we know that now. He still tweets like he's an old man watching Fox News complaining about the president, but he is the president. And if Joe Biden wins, we're going to see Donald Trump be as Trumpy as he's ever been. Because that's just who he is. That's the pattern that is Donald Trump. And as Chris Christie noted, he doesn't change. He just is who he is. But what do these platforms do? They magnify individuals. They magnify these patterns, and they put them in with more patterns. And so, but they're also institutions. And so when Twitter decides that we shouldn't find out what's in Twitter, and Facebook decide we shouldn't find out what's on Hunter Biden's supposed laptop, well, see, we're in a different realm. Well, how are these also institutions? Well, we're seeing that. They're arenic and they're agentic. They're sort of godlike in this. And they have personalities. And Twitter has a personality. It's a very angry, reactive personality, all these little short bursts. Facebook has a personality that, college students saw it because they kind of were curious about each other. But boy, grandparents sure love it because they get pictures of the grandkids. And wow, Paul Vanderklay, he lost all his hair. And so someone in church who's Facebook friends with me says, your high school picture is unrecognizable. Yeah, it is. Had all this blonde, straight hair. And then it was black, curly hair. And now it's no hair. So that the local drug dealer asked me today, how old are you? And I told him. And he said, I'm older than you. I was going to say that's because, Dutch white folks like me. But he says, no, it's because you're a pastor. You're going to be a drug dealer. You got to have good people skills. So if you want to know more about the drug dealer conversation, go to my Twitter account. And I wrote about it this morning, my conversation with the drug dealer. YouTube has a personality. Instagram has a personality. They've all got personalities, but they're also ironic and agentic. And Eric's kind of complaining because they're agentic in a way, and he wants them to be pure arena. But arena, the medium is the message. And that's really the tremendous insight of the Hebrew prophets, that no arena is without agency. And in some ways, agency begets arena. So, and Donald Trump is pushing us past just institutions. Now, if Joe Biden gets back in, again, change is very hard, but Joe Biden, if he gets in, he's the gaffe machine. And so let's go back and be a little bit more presidential. What is presidential? Presidential is the office. It's the institution. Donald Trump looked to, in a sense, recast presidential more back to King Ahasuerus. These things, they're like God. They're both agentic and arenic. And Eric is upset at their agentic qualities as manifest in deplatforming. But these are also very early days, and we're seeing the power of platforms with respect to human persons, because what these platforms are is they're magnifying some of our patterns, hiding some of our other patterns. That's what Facebook does. And so then, and many have been noting this before, what we're doing on these platforms is we're creating new, and we have another word for that, personas. But a persona is a pattern. And, if you talk to my friend Warren Mills, who got to meet his Big Daddy Don Garlitz, I had a hard time, that Australian accent that Warren has. Warren will hear this too. So Warren's first book he wrote before, do I have his book here? Oh, he's going to be upset if I don't have his book here. Where is Warren's book? Anyway, before he wrote his book on How Good is the Golden Rule, he wrote his book on Big Daddy Don Garlitz when nobody wanted to publish it, so he's rewriting it, and I hope he gets it published. And because Warren was growing up, he, in Australia, and I had learned some wonderful things about Australia, how they felt pretty ticked off in the Second World War when all their soldiers were in North Africa fighting, and then the Japanese are eating the Pacific, and Churchill says, you're on your own. And it was America that came. And so for that reason, Australia's got a lot of love in their heart for the United States. And And Warren was born just after the Second World War, and heard all these stories about drag racing in California, and Warren built his own race car, and he worked in the automotive industry, and Warren did all of it. He saw all the patterns coming through, and so, but then he got a chance to meet Big Daddy, and he said, never meet your idols. Well, where's that pattern? What's that saying? Well, because there's a persona out there, and the real life, and that's true of me. You watch me on the YouTube, and if you meet Paul, and then you meet Paul, and Paul in person's a little disappointing from Paul in YouTube in some ways. In other ways, not. I mean, some of you know me in person and on YouTube. Most of you know me just on YouTube, but that's just the way it is, because there's the persona and the person. Well, those are all patterns too. And we're in the early days of these patterns and these social media things. And of course, Jonathan Haidt has said a lot of really important things about the danger of some of the social media. So I maybe should have had this slide elsewhere, because here's the thing, that modernists are still a little twitchy and infected at the supernatural, because the question is, well, how about the Paul Vanderklay persona? Hey, I'm not on Wikipedia yet. Fix that. I'm terrified on what you're going to put on there. Job, Joe, Luke, Sam. I know you people. Rick. Rick knows me. Some people don't believe Rick is real. That's a rumor on the Bridges of Meaning Discord, that Rick is a figment of my imagination. He's a sub-pattern. He's a personality. Those of you who come to the Sacramento meetup have seen Rick in the flesh. Well, here we are. Well, the question is, where are these personas on Facebook? But it's not just on Facebook. Where is it? What is it? And I think if you actually get past the outbreak and the twitchiness about the supernatural, and that, hey, school spirit reshapes people. And the Weinsteins are very upset about all the reshaping that's going on by all kinds of bad patterns, or patterns they think are bad. But okay, and fair enough, the Enlightenment and the Reformation tried to beat out a lot of bullshittery from the Christian church. And Reformations is the title of this other book, because what happened is that there's this spirit of Reformation that's in Christianity, this spirit of self-critique that is actually playing itself out in the rivals and critics of Christianity, and in a sense even continuing to make Christianity better. Well, where'd that come from? How that code got introduced? So give up the twitchiness about the supernatural, because the stuff is hosted somewhere, and whether you're going to sort of play the Jordan Peterson game and just, it was so interesting. Rationality Rules has this video. He kept making videos about Jordan Peterson. That's interesting. In one of these videos, he's saying, Jordan Peterson doesn't really cross the line. He takes you right to the line. I thought, that's right. He's building a stairway to heaven. And then people walk up the stairway and they step over the line. Why? Because, go back to my previous videos, because that's how we're wired. Because we understand all these patterns, and we understand that it's spiritual, and we work in that world, and we're amphibian. So I was talking about the drug dealer today, and I got to the office, and one of the drug dealers in the neighborhood that I know, I recognize his car. He drove his car into the church parking lot, and I thought he was meeting some other people that I know that are often in the church parking lot. And this is one of the beauties about pastoring a church in a neighborhood like this. These are the people in your neighborhood, in your neighborhood, in your neighborhood. And there's an overworld and an underworld in the neighborhood. And the police know this, and the preachers know this. And he told me that he's the 15th of 16th children. The 17th child died stillborn. His mother had 17 children. And this got me interested, because Sunday I was preaching about Genghis Khan and Brad Pitt and you shall not commit adultery, yada, yada, yada. How, anyway, it's so many thoughts go through my head, some of which I can't say. So his mother had 17 children, or 16. The last one died stillborn, or was born stillborn. And his father's a preacher. And his sister's a preacher. And he's a drug dealer. And, some of the other people in the neighborhood told me other things about his family, and we had a lovely conversation. And I was just thinking about the overworld and the underworld, and, well, these are the patterns, and they're in people, and they're all around us. And we just had this outbreak that everyone in the overworld doesn't talk like that, but everybody in the underworld. I've yet to meet a serious atheist who's a homeless person. It's just not there. They're just not there. Read Chris Arnade's book, his book Dignity. I loved that book because I read that book and thought, finally, someone's talking about the other half of the population, a lot of who voted for Trump. Here in California, it's so funny. It's like, we want to restore votes to the felons. They're being oppressed. And I'm thinking, you know who felons are going to vote for? They're going to vote for authoritarians. Have you ever visited a prison? I have. So strange. The Weinstein brothers need to be not afraid of the valley of the shadow of Wu. That came out in a tweet too, because I was trying to figure out what's with them. They rod and they staff will comfort me. You need to go through the valley of the shadow of Wu, and that's where Jordan Peterson went, and he was the one best equipped to do it. Why? Partly because of Jung, okay. And because of a lot of Jung's innovations and Freud's innovations, but partly because of the archetypes, because Jordan Peterson understood patterns. And when Jordan Peterson started talking about this, Jonathan Peugeot listened and thought, this guy and I can be on the same page, and they became friends. Well, archetypes, and if you ask Jonathan Peugeot, he says, I don't look at Jungian archetypes, I look at biblical archetypes. And I look at archetypes in fairy tales. And Jordan Peterson was looking at archetypes in fairy tales because these are old, enduring patterns. And watch, listen to Nassim Taleb and the Lindy effect. You look at old patterns because part of the problem is we're short-lived creatures. We keep looking at all these little patterns. But remember, the language is sloshy. And so archetypes, as he explained back to Susan Blackmore in the video that I did commentary on not too long ago, they help us to see the patterns and their representations endure. That's what archetypes are really helpful for, because it's not only the pattern, but the representation. Because we can see the representation. We can identify the representation of the devouring mother or the tyrannical father. And we can see these representations. And again, like Stories of Old just did a really good video, even though I've got some real questions about his metaphysic. But on Star Wars, what's the deal with the new Star Wars? Well, maybe one of these days I'll have a conversation with that Dutchman. The Dutchmen aren't quite sure where his English accent is. He's got a peculiar accent. The other Dutch tell me the Dutch are such a mimetic country. You gotta be. You got England and France and Germany and Spain. Dutchmen are the bomb. I love Dutchmen. But archetypes help us see the patterns and their representations endure, are hosted. So where are these archetypes? And that's where Jung gets really interesting, because, I'm not really a Jungian myself, but because I started making videos about Peterson, I now know a lot more Jungians, and they write to me and they leave comments. And again, part of what I saw in Peterson and was so drawn to him was some of this Jungian stuff that he sort of, Jung connects heaven and earth in a particular way. Now, I'm not a Jungian because this gets so complicated. I'm not a Jungian because I don't know enough Jung. I'll say it that way. And I just haven't had time to know enough of him. But I like there's Skip, who writes me sometimes, and there's the Uber Boyos. They're so much fun to listen to, but they're perpetuated in the heavenlies. And Peterson has a sense of that, and that's part of the reason. Now Vervaeke and some of the Jungians he's talked with have sort of tamped down some more spiritual Jungian stuff that tends to spring up in that community. But it's been really helpful of saying, okay, how can heaven and earth meet? Because the patterns are in the heavens and they inform the earth. And again, suddenly in some ways we're just back in Aristotle. And so these patterns have been known for a very long time, and we're just always tweaking and refining and trying to refine and purify and understand them better. And that's why, talking with someone like John Vervaeke is so helpful, because he can help me see some things that I can't see, and hopefully I can help him see some things that he can't see. And that's why dialogue, dialogos, talking together is so important. But these make Sam Harris and other materialists or naturalists really nervous. And again, that's the outbreak problem. That this what we found very useful in the lab, sort of like if we used a virus to contain other things in the lab, that virus got out and has infected people. And now it's had its place, I think, in God's scheme of things, at least as far as myself as a Christian thinks of it, because sort of what happened again, I've used this language before, sort of what happened in the world was that confessional Christianity, for example, didn't conquer, it's doing pretty well in China now, didn't conquer India or Japan, but secularity has. And secularity is just sort of a version of Protestant Christianity. And that, of course, Sam doesn't want to hear that. But Tom Holland is right. Tom Holland is right. I'm convinced. And so then we have emerged an ancient pattern expert. That is Jonathan Pageau. And of course, he's an artist, but he also grew up Protestant and French Canadian, so knows a lot of Roman Catholic stuff. So all of those patterns are in Jonathan. And so that's part of the reason Jonathan can talk to all these different traditions, because those patterns are in him. And other patterns are in him. And this is really where Jonathan Pageau comes in, because he really makes people nervous. Again, when I first started listening to Jonathan, and then the second talk I had with Jonathan about spirits, and well, what about the ontology? And again, and that's the stuff I'm working out. Okay, what are spirits? And you say, well, as a pastor, you should know this, shouldn't you? Yes, but it's up to each of us to receive our tradition and improve it. That's the job of every human being. And when we get into our 50s, it's time. And so I keep telling people, Jonathan Pageau is so conservative. In many ways, he's unintelligible to many. And Jonathan Pageau says, I never could have done this channel 5-10 years ago because people wouldn't have understood what I'm doing. And myself, Alistair Roberts, we understand. David Fuller, Rebel Wisdom, he understands. But people don't quite know what to do with Jonathan because he's the pattern. But you see, Jonathan can understand Kanye West and Alex Jones because symbolism is a very deep, embodied, symbolic, dramatic, liturgical, imaginary realm. And Jonathan's really good at reading that realm. And Jonathan basically is an interpreter. And he has to have a certain degree of cognizance about it because he's an artist. It makes sense. Now these ancient patterns are extremely durable. Again, look at Nassim Taleb's Lindsay effect. Look at the interesting characters in the Matrix sequels. Now, the sequels weren't as good as the first one, but some of those characters, like the Keymaker and the Merovingian, and those guys, the twins that he fought, and those are old patterns. And the Matrix was able to sort of bring them into being. That was really cool, even though the sequels fell down in other areas. But the artistry was there, and they bring to light elements of reality, and that's what art does. And Tom Bombadil, you know who you are, who keeps mentioning Tom Bombadil in the comment section, and you want me to talk about Tom Bombadil? Here's Tom Bombadil. And for a long time, I thought, how Tom Bombadil's presence in The Lord of the Rings has perpetually bothered people. Well, couldn't they have given the ring to Tom Bombadil and someone, I don't know, it was the Tolkien professor or Tim Keller or Tolkien itself, someone writing a letter to him, somebody said something to the effect of, well, if you had given the ring to Tom Bombadil, he probably would have paid no attention to it or displaced it because he was running very old code. And so Tom Bombadil, in terms of a little area within Middle-earth, had enormous power. But when the hobbits are trying to get Tom Bombadil and to leverage his power in the global struggle against Sauron, Tom Bombadil's simply uninterested. His pattern is working on something different. And for Tolkien, Tom Bombadil is one of these old legacy codes that are out there. But here's the thing. They come back because old things are really durable. Now, not all things come back. And, there's a little bit of hubbub above the question about universalism and the question and answer in the Discord. When you have something like this that keeps coming back, it's like, well, there's something unfinished there. And the one video that I know Jordan Peterson watched because he tweeted it out was my video about The Office and how I watched my teenage children, once we had streaming, watch and rewatch and rewatch and rewatch The Office, the sitcom. Why? What's the sitcom about? Well, each of these people were archetypes, and you had Dwight, who was the authoritarian, and each of those individuals were archetypes. And so my kids, they're just, and of course Jim and Pam, they're the romantic couple, and Jim is cool and Pam is cool, and they're rewatching things for the same reason that kids would rewatch Pinocchio. So a ton was going on in that, but these are the ancient patterns. They're extremely durable, and they keep coming back. And some patterns, you'd think some patterns are very small, like Jonathan Peugeot likes to talk about our sleep cycle. You're not going to resist these patterns like you're not going to resist sleep. And you can put it off and you can do those things, but it will come back. Well, is sleep a spirit? Where is sleep? Where is sleep kept? Now, you might say, well, sleep is kept in your chemistry and all that. Yeah, it's information in my body and all that, but sleep itself. It's like asking where love is. Well, love is in my heart. Love is between. Love is... And C.S. Lewis's great line, every instance of love will end by death or betrayal. But again, back to Platonism, the form of love persists. Okay, well, where's the form? The form's in the heavens. Well, why is it up there? Why is it up? That was, Jonathan Peugeot's comment on when that one conversation between Peugeot and Peterson and Bret Weinstein, and Weinstein keeps talking about higher level, and Peugeot's like, excuse me. Higher. There's no geometry and materialism that affords such a metaphor. It's true. So, what does Eric want to do? Well, we need to be recalibrating people and person according to spirits. We battle not against flesh and blood, and this is how we remain humanists. That there are sacred value to the individual. And again, Jordan Peterson was very good with this. And pursue change. And we try to do this with, peaceful elections, which is tomorrow. So this will come out on election day. If you're an American, vote and be done with it. And live with the consequences. This pattern we need to keep, we need to maintain. Because people are special instantiations of pattern hosters and initiators. People are godlike. They're made in the image of God. Because we are hosting patterns, we are initiating patterns, and we're creating new patterns. We're principalities, and we create them. Voltrons, institutions, ancient patterns endure and reemerge, and they will keep reemerging. Yes, we are hosted in the heavenlies, but only semi-accessible to us. They are hosted in the heavenlies, and to a degree we are. And of course, the whole Christian story is of the idea that, well, when I die, now a little bit of theology here, the intermediate state, my pattern is remembered by God and then perfected and reinstantiated in the resurrection. Now, of course, there are other ancient patterns that sort of play on that, like karma and reincarnation and those things. You can see that they're working on similar things, but of course, the resurrection of Jesus, which I think is, well, that's why I believe in the physical, bodily, historical resurrection of Jesus, and why for Christians it's the center of history. Because now it reframes all the patterns, and it actually keeps heaven and earth together. Because if you only have a metaphorical understanding of the resurrection of Jesus, you're just going to keep getting Gnostic-y.
It's gotta be a physical resurrection. Yet the Apostle Paul says he has a spiritual body. Well, what does that mean? His body is now remade by the Spirit, and our bodies will be remade by the Spirit, and we will no longer be subject to the epithumias that our bodies are made of. And if you want to know that, you'll have to watch some sermons. But this is what we're working on right now. And that's why Jesus is so critical to the story of the Hebrew Scriptures. And we're dealing with now religion S&W because, well, secularism sees religion and, well, that's because the outbreak went out. But basically, religion W, religion worldview, Jordan Peterson was right. We act it out. But these handles, and you can find it in Religion S and Religion W, handles on the deep, ancient, old practices and our participation in them. I was just thinking, if we do start a Wikipedia page on me, people keep asking me for, like, some of my God number 1, God number 2, Religion S, Religion W, Group 1, Group A, Group B, and we could put all that stuff on the Wikipedia page. So if someone wants to start that, go ahead and start it and send me a tweet or an email or leave a comment, and we'll maybe put my glossary on the Wikipedia page and see if that platform would like to host me or not. Or maybe we should just start a wiki. We've also talked about that before. You can find a lot of that stuff on the Bridges of Meaning Discord server. Religious practice of community, religious practices, the religious practice of course deeply shapes our individual and our communal patterns. That's why religious institutions, both the implicit and the explicit, the immaterial and the others are immaterial too, but the United States government is not material. Where is that? Well, it's in every post office. It's in every dollar bill. It colonizes all around the world through its culture and its movies. Again, these patterns are just awash in them. And again, these are all instantiations and representations of the pattern, so we can track them and we can move among them productively. We are patterns and have subpersonalities. We Voltron up into principalities and institutions, and we are sloshy. We manifest, perpetuate, initiate, propagate patterns without even knowing it. A newborn baby is doing it all the time. We're doing what feels natural. C.S. Lewis's book, Miracles. What is natural? That which that which goes on its own. C.S. Lewis nailed that in his book Miracles. That which goes on its own. That's what we mean by that word. But these patterns go on their own. Where are they hosted? Do they still? We are not our own. We are not as free as we think. We are also more free than we imagine. We are not as powerful as we think. We are also more powerful than we imagine. It's time to get religious, boys and girls. And this is what spiritual means. The times are changing. And I can feel, just before I was thinking, you can already feel the, let's see if I had another video. No, another slide. Now, you can already feel, in a sense, the reign of Donald Trump ending. Now, it doesn't mean he won't win re-election, but again, his second term will be different from his first. And that's the way these patterns go. Where do they come from? Where do they go? That's the game we play. It's all spiritual. So, yep. What am I going to name this video? From Weinstein to the existence of God, something like that. I'll figure it out. I'll have to name it today or tomorrow. But anyway, thank you for your time and attention. So, yeah, if you haven't subscribe to the channel. Will you do that with YouTube? Because I know some of you have to sign into YouTube. I know some of you watch and never subscribe because you don't want to be within the pattern of YouTube, and fair enough. You're already technically savvy to know all this stuff, so I don't have to tell you anything. If you want to support this channel, there's Patreon, there's PayPal. You can give donations to Living Stones Church. If you pay U.S. taxes, donations to my church are tax deductible. So, if you give $130,000, you'll give a year's budget to this church. That simple. We're a pretty we're a pretty economic little outfit. So thanks for watching.